in Connecticut was practiced until 1848. I just wanted to lift these things up as in this moment, in this political moment, nation and internationally and locally, and just state that the New Haven Food Policy Council believes that Black Lives Matter, and it's doing its own work to analyze its role in anti-racist and anti-oppressive work in local food systems. The New Haven Food Policy Council has existed since 2005 and is a volunteer advisory board of community New Haven residents that works to propose food policy to change our local food system so that everyone has access to locally produced, healthy, and affordable food options. And I am Raven A. Blake, chair, recently appointed chair of the New Haven Food Policy Council, also co-deputy director of CT Core Organize Now, and executive director of Love Fed Initiative, and based in New Haven. And with that being said, I would like to pass along the torch to Latha Swami.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Latha Swami. I'm the Director of Food Policy for the City of New Haven. It's quite a unique role being a city official that solely focuses on food and ag policy. There are only about 25 of us around the country. And I work on a variety of all aspects of the food system, from, you know, how you grow your food to how food is distributed, how food is, how we, interact with food, and we can get more into all the details. But I'm really excited about all the panelists that are here to join us today. So just to also clarify, so I'm a city official and I work very closely with the New Haven Food Policy Council. And so we're here today to talk to our panelists about a variety of issues, primarily centered around food justice and kind of things that have been coming up around COVID-19, and just experiences, challenges, and solutions around what they're seeing prior to the pandemic, right during the pandemic, and what they foresee coming up. So I would like to pass it on to Eric, if you can introduce yourself, and then pass it on to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you, Latha. Hey, everybody. My name is Eric Ray. I am an entrepreneur, artist, coach, facilitator. I don't know, there's probably a couple of other things in there, but I'm here today probably in my capacity as the co-founder and owner of SOPA New Haven. Born and raised in New Haven, and glad to be here. So thank you. And I will pass it off to my good friend and colleague, Poria.
I think.
Can you hear?
No. Oh, we can hear you now.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know if I froze or not. Sorry. So did he call on me? Because I didn't hear the last part.
Yes.
All right. Hi. Thank you, Eric. And go SOPA. So yes, my name is Paria Benton, the owner of Vegan Ahava LLC, a food truck in New Haven, Connecticut. I've been the owner and operator of Vegan Ahava since it opened in November of 2019. And I'm starting to get my name out there. My business has been rapidly, and I appreciate Raven for inviting me on this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it then to Susan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Susan Harris. I'm a member of the New Haven Food Policy Council, as well as a member to Witnesses to Hunger, as well as a member to the Coordinated Food Assistance Network. And I've been involved with the food insecurity work in New Haven for the past 2 or 3 years, but I spent some time working in a food pantry and other food entities in the community before that, and I'm glad to be here. I guess I'll pass it on to Adrienne.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Adrienne Huck, and my pronouns are they, them, and I'm a recent graduate from Metropolitan Business Academy in New Haven. And the work that I do, I'm a climate activist and organizer with the New Haven Climate Movement, which is a mainly youth-led, but also intergenerational organization here in New Haven, which fights for local, strong climate action and policies and investments. And also some of my other environmental involvements include being a youth member with Love Fed last year. I'm also an intern with the Urban Resources Initiative, which plants free trees around New Haven. And back when I was in school, I was also an advocate for recycling and for food recovery opportunities. So I'm really happy to be here. And I'll pass it on to Jenna.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Martin. I'm the lead chef instructor at CONCAT, Connecticut Center for Arts and Technology and for Science Park. I'm also the supervisor of the Orchid Cafe. And I just want to say thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. So I think perhaps we can start with a few questions just to get conversation going. Perhaps we'll start with the first thing that probably is on most of our minds, besides the storm that just came through. We can talk about the different kind of prolonged storm that's happening right now, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. So perhaps we can start with a question around that. And what we'd like to know is, how has the COVID-19 pandemic illuminated areas of advancement for the work that you do in your sector of the food system, since all of you represent a variety of aspects of the food sector? It'd be really interesting to hear how the COVID-19 pandemic has illuminated areas of advancement for the work that you do in your sector. Happy to go with whoever wants to talk first, or I can call on someone. Great. Okay, so I'll call on someone. How about Susan? Do you want to start?
Sure. What really struck me as far as the COVID when it hit was how a lot of the food providers rallied together to provide food for those who were in need, ramping up into the P2P program, which was pantry to pantry, which loaves and fishes and desk came together with other entities in the city to provide delivered meals to those that could not get out due to health concerns or other issues. And it ramped up to, I believe last week, they served over 1,000 people, and it's still going. They're trying to ramp it down at this point to turn it back into brick and mortar, hopefully by the end of the month, sending it out to the pantries which are open at this point. So that's one issue. Another issue for me was the summer meals, because of the schools closing. Gail Sherry at the New Haven school system ramped up her team to provide meals twice a day to the children at 38 schools, and it's still going on, which is another area that's close to my heart, which is the August gap, which is the point at where summer meals would have ended at the end of July, and then nothing would be available until school started. So it sort of, closed that this year. So I'm really pleased about that. Yeah, about it for now.
And Eric, I know you were doing pretty unique work with your business model and also providing food relief during the time. I don't know if you want to mention that a bit.
Sure. Yeah. So at SOPA, we sort of pivoted a little bit to offering quarts of soup that essentially the way that the model worked was people could donate money that would pay for a quart of soup to be delivered to whoever needed it or wanted it. Essentially, and we were pretty open with the way that worked, so that it was sort of a no questions asked. We set up a separate part of our website so that there was no charge. You would just get on and essentially send a note with the particular kind of soup that you wanted and where it would be delivered. And that was really just our effort to assist and to help people who were in need. We reduced the cost of the donated quarts to essentially just cover our expenses. So we didn't make any money on that. That wasn't the intent. The intent was to be able to provide a quart of soup to anyone who might need it. So people took advantage of that. The donations were forthcoming, and people took the soups, and we were able to actually offer soups in bulk to organizations who were working with people who were disproportionately impacted. So we served some people at local nonprofits and some folks through the Housing Authority, and able to provide, by the time it was all said and done, we had done close to 100 quarts of soup. So, roughly 25 gallons of soup that were donated and that we hand delivered. So that was great, and actually has turned into how we'll do business moving forward. Our sort of thinking was that this is not something that's specific to COVID, but rather kind of how we want to do business in the world. So people will be able to continue to donate soups, but even if for some reason the donations stop, we're still going to maintain a section of our website where people can go and just request a soup, and sort of a no questions asked. If you need something, we'll bring it to you. So.
I'll jump in if other folks are still thinking. Yeah, that's amazing, Eric. Also, nice background. I think what COVID-19 kind of illuminated for the areas of work I'm involved in is the abundance of resources that came as far as like funding and other things like that when the need was met, but all where the need was where there was a call for a need for all these different emergency food systems to kind of like come to the forefront, and how stressed and how crazy it was kind of for those systems to come together in a very rapid way under pressure with yeah, and a lot of coordination. And it really highlighted for me like what already exists as far as like whether it's local or even like nationally governmental sponsored food programs are not enough. And I think folks who in a lot of sectors who interact with the food system have known that for a long time. And then so during the pandemic, it really was that the emergency food or organizations, groups, systems that existed were really, the stress was put on them to kind of come to the forefront. And while there, in some ways where it was, whereas opportunity for funding, there was also lack of capacity to get the funding, or just a lot of funding going strictly towards the service itself, but not the people who do it. And I think we experience and see that a lot as far as like not just restaurant workers, but also like people who work in food pantries and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity, or a lot of that could happen as far as like in that moment, why that happened and how to change our food systems so that they don't actually rely on these programs that we know don't work as well as they could. And then another thing I noticed was like kind of like how open source information became because of the urgency to kind of fill gaps, whether it's food or clothing or housing and things like that. Whereas, or even, yeah, like just access to information became more open or open source in some ways that they would not have been. And I think kind of speaking, at least from the perspective of the Food Policy Council, working in partnership with the Food Systems Division, is that it became a lot easier to help coordinate and get things done through other city departments than it ever has been, which is something that should be continued, hopefully, is what we're hoping for. But yes, that's a couple of things I think as far as just like illuminating areas that can improve for sure.
Mm-hmm. And for me, so I am not directly in the food sector, but as we know, like climate change is deeply intertwined with our health and our food systems, and climate change is just a threat to everyone and everything on the planet. So for me, I think COVID just heightened an awareness that we really do need robust action on climate change, because we saw that even if most people are staying home and not really going out much and commuting, we're still like not down enough on emissions to be in line with the United Nations recommendation of cutting emissions 7.6% per year by 2030 to like ensure that, well, to slow climate breakdown. So it's just really scary thinking, well, we did like as much as we can. That's what it felt like for us, but we're still like not there for meeting the mark for saving the planet. So I'd say an area of advancement that I saw was that we really just desperately need to be pushing for action on climate change at an emergency speed. And another thing, another area of advancement I'd say is just more of a heightened awareness of food justice's relation to climate and environmental justice, as well as racial justice, because I feel just a failure of the environmental movement as a whole is not looking at the connections that sustainability holds to social justice, especially for white environmentalists not seeing that. So I think this time has really allowed climate organizations like mine and other ones to continue on with a stronger focus of connecting climate to other social justice issues.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if and no one else
Yeah.
wanted to share, then we can move on to the next question as well. Thank you so much, Adrian, for that. So the next question that we have is, what short-term or long-term policy change needs to happen in order to move us towards a future of true food justice and food sovereignty?
So perhaps I can get part of the conversation started on that, because I do, my title is Food Policy Director. But so one of the things that it's kind of answering the first question and tying it to this, and related to what you said, Raven, about kind of the resources that came up during the COVID-19 pandemic and where they were being directed. So there is, when thinking about the food system, often sometimes the narrative solely focuses around providing food to people. And that very much, when we think about it, is a bit of a downstream solution. Social safety nets are definitely important and necessary. But I think in tandem with that, we need to also think about policies that are working to address root causes. So as Adrian mentioned, policies that are anti-racist, climate policies that are thinking about our land and our environment. You know, where does food come from? It comes from the land for the most part, so, or the sea. And so I think that focusing resources toward upstream solutions and root causes is something that we can pivot more of our policy and resources towards. So, you know, what does that mean? So instead of pumping money into the emergency food system, I think one of the goals should be around thinking about policies around fair wages or thriving wages. Economic security would allow for people to be able to make their own decisions around what they need for their household, and would ultimately lead to less reliance on social safety nets. So then you'd actually see a decrease in need for some of these downstream solutions. Thinking about housing, thinking about access and ownership over land. Private property is a whole, you know, generational system that often Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been excluded from for hundreds of years since colonization. So I think some of these things should be the focus of policy change, and then we can see those impacts further downstream around food security specifically. So that's, as far as my work goes, I'm trying to focus on that at the local level, but definitely bringing in people from different parts of the food sector to make that actually work. Those policies actually make sense and work for people, and move toward something that's community driven and community owned, and less, you know, even though I'm saying that upstream solutions is where we need to look, it doesn't mean the community doesn't have ownership over those ideas and over those policies, right? So it's a bit of a multi-pronged approach, but I'm definitely here for that.
That's great, Latha. I, you know, for me, as I think about from sort of my little corner of the food industry here, you know, I'm thinking just as a business owner, the sort of challenges that I encountered, you know, starting and running a business, has been tremendously challenging. And I knew that it would be tough getting into it. So I sort of went into it with eyes wide open, but certainly discovered these little kind of nooks and crannies of policy that made it challenging for sure. And for me, it felt like that there's potential there. And I don't have any hard, fast solutions, but one thing that kind of stands out to me is a kind of streamlining of the process to make just to make it less burdensome for folks. I mean, I consider myself fortunate that I was part of a food business accelerator, which gave me an opportunity along with support and resources to kind of navigate the process. But if this was something that I had to do purely on my own and just kind of like piece it together, it would have been much more difficult to try to make this happen. And without having, for example, like I as far as I know, I'm the first one in my family to have a food business. So I didn't have sort of like that social capital to kind of lean on. I didn't have any other kind of resources other than just kind of my own desire to kind of talk to people and work my way through it. So that's certainly one thing that I think would have been helpful for me as an entrepreneur and a business owner.
So, sorry, Raven, were you going to say something?
No, I was just gonna say that I saw you unmuted, so I wanted to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. So as Eric was saying, I face a lot of those challenges with my students. Everyone comes into the program kind of saying they want to run their own business, and I think that's amazing. And if there was some type of stream that they could use to do that, it would be a lot easier. But what I've been telling them now, especially after COVID, or well, not after, but it's still COVID. But what I've been telling them since they've been back to school is, we as cooks, as chefs, as entrepreneurs in the food business, we have this exploitation of us, of food service workers, and the wages and how much we actually get paid. A lot of people come into the program thinking I'm going to come out of this as a chef and I'm going to get paid top dollar, but I let them know, like, you have to work your way up. And we work 10 to 15 hours a day. Unfortunately, a lot of us that work in restaurants, we can't even afford the food that we give our customers. We work so much, we go home, we don't have time to make a healthy meal for our family because we're so taxed with working so much and trying to just make ends meet. So I just wanted to touch on that, because if there was a stream to help upcoming chefs, upcoming restaurant workers, that would really be helpful to our industry, especially now. It's hard, and it's been devastating to our industry, unfortunately. I always tell my students, like on their first day, no matter what happens in the world, no matter if you're happy or sad, we always go out to eat. And that suddenly changed. So, I just think that's important.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Jen was saying, what about reaching out to Black and Brown communities who have wealth of history and knowledge and background in different areas that could be helpful as far as getting these, entrepreneurs and budding programs off the ground, with mentorship and help and, well, I've been through this and, this is what I experienced, and helping them along in that way. And maybe also for the, you know, as far as contributing to the conversation about, you know, food security and food justice in New Haven, period, giving them more of an input to say, you know, this is what we'd like to see, and this is what, you know, we're missing in our neighborhoods.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of everybody, what they were saying in the food industry, like if we had not even just a go-to, but something that lists every step on what to do to open up a business, because when I was opening up a food business, God, I had Collab, thank God I had Concat, City Seed, and other resources like that. But I've been helping people who don't even know me, who just come to the truck or who just meet me through Facebook, have been asking me numerous of questions on how to open this, what's the next step, and I'm giving them what I learned before I made the mistakes that I made. I'm giving them all of the information that I have without any cost, without wanting anything in return, because I just wished I had those exact step on what to do to open up a food business. So I know exactly what Chef Jay and Ms. Eric and everybody else is saying about the straightforward on what to do to open up a food business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll second that, because Poria definitely helped me out with the insurance. So thank you, because I didn't know how to get that done, and I went there, and she was like, yeah, just do it this way and that way, and I was like, oh, killer. Thank you
And I
very
learned that
much.
from
So
City Seed.
there you
Yep.
go. So that's each one teach one for sure. And I just wanted to add one more quick thing, and I apologize, Adrian, if I cut you off. Cool. But I just wanted to, the other thing I would say is, particularly as it relates to starting a business, capital for small businesses, particularly small food businesses. And to me, it seems like, there would be a vested interest in that, because food is such a draw, right? Like everybody knows New Haven as a food town. People come from all over the region to come here, from like all over the state. I mean, if we think of something like pizza is a huge draw. Like people come from all over to have and experience New Haven pizza. But that's true for much of the food here. And so that brings dollars into the city. And so to me, it seemed like there would be a vested interest to have this sort of great variety of people, and of food available for folks to be able to try and experience. And capital is a big part of that. It's the kind of like the lifeblood of what keeps any business afloat. So that would be the other thing I would add to the conversation. Thank you. And again, Adrian, I apologize.
Oh, you're okay. I just wanted to add on. I really like what Lathal mentioned earlier about how we need to look at like the root of these issues. And you mentioned also like living and thriving wages. Like a lot of people don't exactly see like the connection between food and our work, but definitely if we have living and thriving wages, we can self-determine what's best for us and our families when it comes to food. And other solid policy change, I think, could be, for example, mandating a gardening education program in schools so youth are more exposed to how to grow food for themselves and for their families. I think it's really important to have these programs for youth so they can take that knowledge and carry that with them. And another thing, like having the city or the state fund initiatives like Love Fed that are doing work on food justice in the community. So these nonprofits don't have to go chasing after grant money to do the amazing work that they're doing in the community. So I think that definitely having the city of New Haven or the state of Connecticut fund programs that are working on food justice in communities would be a really helpful thing to have. So we don't have to keep, chasing after grant money, and we can do the work that needs to be done when it comes to food sovereignty.
I just want to, well, acknowledge that Sade has joined us. And then I'll let her intro, but I just wanted to say a point off of what you're saying, Adrienne. And I think, I mean, so many ideas around policy changes, like it's, the opportunities are almost like endless there. And I think related to urban ag at least, but also in a broader way, rural land, farmland in Connecticut too, because like just a couple miles outside of New Haven, you can find farmland. So like it's not too far that we can actually go to a rural farm and actually see like where some of our food comes from that, you know, can even be found at City Seed as farmers markets. And I think the opportunity for policy change, including through, you know, farm to school type of programs where the focus is less on just doing farm to school where it's obvious and rural and focusing it in urban, like in cities, really, where there's lack of access to green spaces and whatnot, but all and other resources, but you know, you touching on the just education as far as like growing food, right? Like that starts early for some people, but not everybody, and that's like a very privileged thing. And exposing to young people to something like that very early on can like get them involved, like they can get involved in the climate and choose something, you know, a career path down that way, or they can like choose a career path down being like an actual producer to provide food for people, or realize that there are also other options other than working on in the few sides of or in the few areas of the food industry that don't exploit labor, or, you know, like touching on what you're you know, mentioned before as far as just like determining, like community actually determining. And I think a lot of it would be nice to, well, I'll get kind of getting into the next question a little bit, but it would be nice to at least see more trusting as far as like when it comes to investing and funding opportunities, that people actually trust community to say what they need as well. That being said, I want to pass it to Sade so you can do your intro. So happy you can join us.
Thank you,
It's
Rachel.
just we were just I think we just started with our names and then like any associations you want to share that were relevant for the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Sade Jean-Jacques, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm an educator, a doula, and lactation counselor, and I'm also the founder of Pascal's Body Care, and I'm happy to be here with you all today.
I just wanted to add something to kind of touch on multiple things that people have mentioned. I completely agree, Eric, about the barriers that you and Jenna and Perea brought up about just the regulatory resource information barriers that you have as far as setting up your food business. One thing that I'm trying to do in my role at the city, because it's a very prevalent issue that's come up from multiple people that have brought up that it's a very opaque kind of system, at least for example, like permitting process, or not even just the permitting process, but even thinking about the money to actually you know, get that permit in the first place, or all the documentation you need, or what step comes before this step and which signature you need before the next one. So one thing that what we're trying to do is really try to make the process transparent, easy to navigate. And also, and I know some of you have taken advantage of this or tried to, we also set up a new permitting stream called a micro food business, so that businesses that don't have the capital to set up a brick and mortar, like restaurant or even a food truck, are able to rent kitchen space from a commercial kitchen. And, you know, we introduced that, I think about April 2019, it became officially an ordinance. worked on it with the Food Policy Council. It was one of the first things I did when I started the position. But of course, through that process, you know, especially Eric, you and I have talked about this, you know, things that come up that show that it's not actually that it helped in some ways, but there's still more that we could do, right? And it connects back to what Raven was saying, like other city departments, not just mine, need to know what that permitting process is, right? And so there was some of that internal education that and awareness it wasn't there yet. And then also thinking about not even resource and information and regulatory barriers around food businesses. One thing that we're hoping to do in my division is also think about creating a transparent, easy to navigate process around acquiring land that's owned by the city, and thinking about what zoning regulations and land use policies are actually barriers for people who want to perhaps own, or at the very least long-term lease land in the city to grow food or use as a productive piece of land for, you know, a community garden or any sort of kind of outdoor educational space. And so that's something that we're also hoping to work on. And again, that's going to be like a community-led, community-driven process that's not, hopefully, you know, it's not prescriptive. It's not coming from the city, right? It's like asking everyone what they want. So I just wanted to mention that because I felt like it was connected to a lot of things people said. Thanks.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to offer one more time before we transition to the next question, if anybody else wanted to talk about short-term or long-term policy that you see needs changing, or new policies that need to be put in place around food and access, or land and access, because it ties into food or climate. Okay, cool. Well, thank you all for the contributing for that. And then I'm going to ask this last question, and there are actually two, but I think they kind of go hand in hand since since it's we kind of like try to line up our questions to make sense in some type of order. So I'm going to ask two questions, and then when you respond, you can answer both of them together if you'd like. So the last questions are, how do you imagine creating better systems and infrastructure to contribute to an ideal local food system that does not exploit the labor, bodies, and lives of BIPOC communities? And what action steps can people take? And that's kind of that last question is kind of just you know, asking what action steps people can take who are like viewing this, will be viewing this, of like what role they kind of play in food systems. And I don't think a lot of people do, but even if you're a consumer, we all participate in the food system in one way or another. And it impacts all of our lives. So I'll repeat that one more time, and then I'll let everybody go, or whoever would like to go first. How do you imagine creating better food systems and infrastructure that contribute to an ideal local food system that does not exploit the labor, bodies, and lives of BIPOC communities? And what are action steps that people can take?
So I think a really major part of this conversation is, like you mentioned, Raven, allowing communities to self-determine what food system they believe would best work for them, or what methods would best work for them based on their experiences with access to food. And also, we can't force solutions on communities that we don't belong to. So I feel it's really important to allow communities to self-determine. And I also think a good part in contributing to an ideal local food system is speaking to elders and making our work intergenerational, especially speaking to elders who are Indigenous, if that is something that's accessible in the community, on how to best move forward with this. And of course, have them involved and cared for in the process rather than making it transactional and not exploiting their labor. And as for infrastructure, I feel community gardens are really great, just like open spaces and free land people can contribute to and use for their planting or farming needs. And home gardens are great as well, equipping people with free home gardens, plus the education and training that they might need to go along with it, because there's a quote from Leah Penniman from Soulfire Farms. I believe it's, if you can feed yourself, you can free yourself. So I feel an action step people can take in this is being or trying to go towards being more self-sufficient when it comes to the food system, because, you know, there are these really big food giants and corporations that we can't take down very easily. But one thing that we can do as people is to start trying to localize our food, whether that's growing things ourselves or trying to participate in local farmers markets, or other ways to access local foods or advocate for it at least.
Yeah, very, very well said, Adrian. Thank you for that. And I really love that idea of involving elders. That was one of the things that I was thinking is like, we don't have to reinvent stuff. You know, there are a lot of great practices that are out there, right? Because I'm just thinking as we think of how to create a system, I was thinking like, oh well, like there's something different than what we have now. Like, I'm just not even aware of those things. So, really connecting with folks and yeah, similar to what you said, indigenous people, I just think, what a great way to begin, and adding what we know and what we have access to today in terms of resources and technology, and kind of combining those things and doing it in a way that is equitable, and that actually is driven by the people who will benefit from it. So I think that's great. That was going to be my idea, but obviously it wasn't. So
Yeah,
I just
absolutely.
wanted.
Like the knowledge is already there, and we need to access it while caring for the people who are providing the wisdom to us. So the knowledge is there, and we need to put it to good use.
Hey, Adrian, I'm also gonna go off of what you were talking about with the farmers markets, and maybe the point of bringing them more to more black and brown communities. So they're aware of the benefits of the produce and the vegetables and fruits that they usually can't afford, or do without, because the cost factor, and as far as doubling the food stamps, when you get the coins at the farmers market, and how valuable those can be, and going from there to maybe getting the communities to look into community gardens to have access for themselves.
Yeah, I have some things I wanted to touch on as well. I think as far as different things that we can see is definitely self-determining food economies. I don't think like there's any other way around that. Like there is no way that we can continue to rely on the existing capitalist food system that is, aside from COVID-19, failing to save like BIPOC communities all over the United States, especially, and make opportunities more accessible, and through an anti-racist lens, not just one that is like quote unquote equitable, because I think being not direct around what you're trying to do is a lot of ways that like provides opportunity for really well-known institutions to actually do work, and instead of providing opportunities for community and just like residents to do work for their own communities. So I think opportunities need to be more accessible through an anti-racist lens, and actually that means like like analyzing how to shift power with what systems actually exist, and if it's actually you know, if these systems are actually like, are our community gardens like really led and community owned? Like how difficult is it for anybody to be a food entrepreneur? Why is it so hard to access green space? I also think that there are opportunities to build economies that are not exploited and not capitalist, that centers people. And I think this goes back to like the true definition of food sovereignty. When we read it, it's like, it's a long definition, but in short, it's just like for people who belong in the community to determine their own food systems and what is most sustainably and ecologically sound for them. And I think there are great examples, like we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are things that exist, like mutual aid is one of those examples that has really become the go-to during the pandemic, but has been in existence, especially with historically marginalized persons who created these groups and the idea of mutual aid because of systemic oppression. So like LGBTQ plus folks, also indigenous, also a lot of like folks who are also like actually disabled as well, right? So these systems do exist, and I think it takes being in community to also be in community with these particular populations within BIPOC communities to as long as we're making our systems accessible to these people, then that's really where I think the answers lie as far as creating systems that work for everybody. And I'm sorry, I was like taking notes, y'all, so I'm just like looking at that. Also, I want to say that when it comes to like building economies and shifting even just from locally to state or national funding, the call for Black Lives Matter is to defund the police. And when we look at what our funding goes to as far as like local municipalities to even the state level, it is an exponential amount of money that goes to policing and sometimes multiple other departments that provide services for residents. Multiple departments budgets don't even make up what it goes to policing, right? Like, and so when we're talking about infrastructure, it's also really important that we're analyzing it through an anti-racist lens, right? Like being like, well, why is there so much money going towards this? And what opportunities lie therefore to create other systems that nourish people, not just through food, but in other ways as well. And I'll let anybody else go because we only got like 7 minutes.
Also, probably hiring those in need, like example, the homeless. You would be surprised how many people come to the truck downtown that's either looking for a healthy meal. They don't even care that it's vegan or that it's not. They don't even care. They just want a nice help, and they like, I'll work for it. I'll help you, but I'm just giving, if I have the food left, I'm giving it to them. So that would be something that we can do probably to help the communities, hire those that's in need, either to work on the farm, to work on a farm, and by working, they can get a healthy meal or free greens, free any, like something like that.
One of the things I want to mention is around this piece of food entrepreneurship and how to make that space a bit more accessible. And one of the things I think about are like, how do we create pipeline programs or mentorship opportunities for folks, specifically younger folks that have experience, in school with cooking or, learning this, but not knowing where to take that afterwards, right? So how can our collaborations in the community be more intentional so that when folks are graduating, if they're coming from Common Ground or other places where this is something that they're learning, how do we also invest in their continued learning by pairing them with a mentor or pairing them with organizations where they can have access to that entrepreneurship space, to have a better understanding of what it means to sort of create this business that's rooted in food and food justice. And also, how do we also create a network of support for current food entrepreneurs? And I apologize if this is something that was already mentioned earlier, but those are some of the things that I think about, is maintaining, a sustainable a network where folks have the access to the things that they need.
Yeah, what was touched on before, there were pieces of entrepreneurship, but not the kind of like sustainable network and continuedness. Somewhat as far as like entrepreneurship, but yeah, for like any part of the food system, right? That sounds amazing. So we only have 5 minutes left. So anybody else, definitely feel free to keep responding, keeping the discussion going if you would like. If like for 2 more minutes, and then we can like wrap it up real nicely. And in those 2 minutes, if you want to share some actions that anybody can do, including where they can find your website or anything, or support your work, please say that now.
One action I would say is support local. There is incredible expertise from people who live like next door. They're your neighbors. They're, somebody's got a business, somebody's got a side hustle. I'm just, and not even a side, like this is the thing, like this is what they're doing, right? Of the 2 entrepreneurs that are on the line right now, I've purchased from both of them intentionally and regularly. So do that. Support local. Your neighbor is like selling pies. Buy 1, buy 2, buy 3, and give it to the neighbor on the other side and be like, yo, 2 doors down, she's making pies, go do it. So that would be my suggestion. soaponewhaven.com.
Shameless plug. Well, I know we don't have much time, so I will definitely want to share again that folks will be able to find information from all the panelists on the New Haven Symphony Orchestra website under this event as well. And then there's a Facebook event for, so we'll be posting all the participants on this call. So please do visit these websites, the social media, support all the work that's been going on. You can visit the New Haven Food Policy Council, nhfoodpolicycouncil.org, and our social media is NHVFPC. And I want to just like thank everybody for coming onto this. We kind of just like, threw this all together, and everybody's so busy. August is a real time of year for everybody. And I just really appreciate you all for saying yes and joining us. And I appreciate this discussion. I appreciate you. Little thought.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know this might be a little bit of like a big little nugget at the end, but I did want to just highlight the point that Eric did make around social capital. And I think it's really important to actually mention that, because we do live in New Haven, and we do live in, or I'm assuming most of us, we're all working in New Haven and we're spending time here. And that we do live with Yale University, and just with the discussion around entrepreneurship and stuff, and those who actually, and thinking about pipelines, and those who are granted social capital, and thinking about, anti-racism and equity around those who are inherently kind of given that social capital in the systems that they inhabit, versus, for example, like neighborhood entrepreneurs who are not kind of handed that social capital. And so I think the point Eric made about supporting your neighbors is really important to really drive home here.
Break free from the capitalist food system.
Yes, exactly.
In every way possible. Yes.
Is there a policy for like supporting your local neighbor if she's gardening. And for example, if I wanted to purchase in bulk from her, she's growing greens or tomatoes. Is there a policy? Do you have to go through the city of New Haven food policy to purchase from her? Or, you know, because some stuff you have to have like or ordinance or a policy to buy from certain places and stuff like that. Is there a policy that has something to do with like that or no?
Right on at the end of time, there is no specific policy around that, but you know, we can make policies that protect around making that allowable, right? So those are kind of the things I'd love to work with all of you on.
Okay.
Cool. All right, you were at the 7 o'clock mark, and there is a show that is coming up next. So we want to make sure that there is Kenneth Joseph's musical premiere. So that's next, right now. Thank you all again. Take care. Have a great evening.
Thank
Night.
you.
Thank
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
you.